Welcome everybody to episode number 32. I got it wrong before, but I have it right now. This is episode 32. God damn, we are just blazing through the weeks here of the Dota show. For anybody who's wondering what we're going to be talking about today, we are going to be talking about the laning stage, and it's something I've touched on in the past, but today in particular, we're really going to take an in-depth look at it. And we're going to focus on the core concepts of that. So a lot of my past episodes have been more hero-focused or very specific aspects of the laning stage. But we're going to take a much broader look at, how can you sort of set your team up for a good laning stage? How can you make adjustments as a group to try and set up that laning stage? But before we dive all into that, a few little icebreakers here. So, it's only 9 days until I leave for Seattle, and personally, I am excited, man. I mean, how could I not be? I'm going to get to meet all my favorite pros, and there's a long list. I'm going to get to cast some great games. I'm going to get to watch some great games as well and watch other great commentators do their thing too. So I'm really excited, and it's gotten to the point now where I can't even sleep. I stay up at night. I'm like, man, it's only 9 days away. And I have this shit-eating grin on my face. Then I have like this moment of panic where I'm like, oh shit, I got to wake up and cast tomorrow for the international. Wait, no, not yet. So I'm starting to have the nightmares a little bit too, where you like late for your test or late for a cast. And well, I'm hoping that won't happen. Lumi will probably drag me there kicking and screaming, but I'm a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie, but mostly just very, very excited. Can't wait for it to come. For anyone who's wondering what's going on Beyond the Summits World Tour, tomorrow will be the semifinals and the grand finals. I just want to mention it because there's been a lot of delays, so if you're watching this on the VODs, I will try to have it up tonight before the matches kick off. But tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. SGT, or I guess it would be 9 p.m. SGT, not 9 a.m., 9 p.m. SGT. Or if you're from the U.S., that would be 9 a.m. your time for Eastern Standard Time. So anyway, Beyond the Summit World Tour, the semifinals, the finals. Man, it's been a great run for the tournament. It's my first big event where I've been the primary caster, and I've definitely, there's been some slip-ups, technical difficulties here or there. But overall, I've been really excited with the way the tournament's gone, and I'm hoping the semifinals and the grand finals will live up to the rest of the event, which overall I have to say has been one of the best tournaments out there, if I don't say so myself. Aside from that, what else is going on? Oh, I went grocery shopping, and this sounds like the most mundane shit ever, but let me tell you, I came home, I unloaded all the groceries. If you live on your own, for those who live with their parents, they very much take this for granted, or if you have roommates who do your shopping, you'll take it for granted too. But if you ever live on your own and you go grocery shopping, that feeling when you come back, especially if you haven't gone shopping in a while and you've been ordering out or just sort of eating the leftovers, whatever you have, you come back and like, you finish unpacking, and then the next time you want to go eat, you just feel like a king. Like if you've ever read the Redwall series or Lord of the Rings or Song of Ice and Fire, any of these books where there's like page-long descriptions of delicious feasts. I mean, I don't have anything quite that good in the cupboard, but man, I feel like a king having all that delicious food at my disposal. Yeah, that's me, buddy, and no, you can't have any. Grocery shopping, one of these things which is like surprisingly therapeutic, I guess I want to say. And the last thing is, I think I'm turning into a cat. And the reason I say this is I tried to hack up a furball today, and if you don't believe me, you should have heard me earlier. I was going, I think it was like mucus or something. But it felt like a furball in the middle of my throat, so I blame the cat. I blame El Gato for that. Oh, that damn cat. Speaking of which, I think she's meowing. Let me see if I can get her in here. Nope, apparently not. I just hate when she's sitting there at the door meowing. Okay, guys, so without any further ado, we're going to jump right into it. There's a lot of content to cover today. Not too much time to do it, so we're going to have a little bit of a shorter prelude. But here we go. Let's before we dive into the game, though, I want to talk a little bit about the laning stage. In past weeks, like I said, I've talked about different laning situations, like playing off-lane bounty hunter or solo mid-tinker and different builds you can go on these heroes. La-di-la-di-la, you get the idea. But we haven't really talked about the big picture of the laning stage. And today that's what we're going to do, is talk about sort of those core concepts, the overall goals that a team should have, and why you might see certain lanes, sort of why you would want to set things up a certain way, what you should be looking to get out of your lanes, which will depend on the heroes in the game. And I guess the first question is, well, why care about the laning stage? Does it really matter? I mean, most pub games, if you watch them, teams don't end the game quickly. There might be a bunch of feeders, but the games will go on for 50, 60 minutes. So really, how much does that laning stage matter? It actually matters a lot. I would go so far as to say, I don't have stats to back this up. I'm sure there may be some out there. The vast majority of games, I'm talking like 80% plus, are won or lost in the first 10 minutes. Now, you will see the epic comebacks. You will see games that are not clearly decided during that time, where it wouldn't be fair to say one team won or lost. But especially in pubs, especially in lower-level matchmaking, I would say the vast majority of games are won or lost in the first 5-10 minutes or so. Along with that comes this idea, well, the pros care about the laning stage. So if you want to be successful as a player, emulate successful people. It's a good practice in any field, but especially in Dota. You'll even hear teams like Navi talk about how like they don't think about team composition or strategy as much in interviews. Sure, they have, they're smart guys. They know their Dota. Trust, it's fair to say that they consider these things, but the most important factor for a lot of these pro teams is having solid lanes, and that's why you see heroes that are strong laners being very high priority picks. Heroes like Invoker, Lone Druid, Windrunner. This is why heroes like Batrider used to be very popular as well, even though they've fallen off the scene a little bit. Heroes that are strong laners are always going to have a case that can sort of be made for them about why they should be picked. So if the pros care about the laning stage, you probably should too. And I guess the last point I'll make is, have you ever just played a pub game and felt like the entire game is just out of your control? Like, personally, I know I have. I've played so many games where I'm like, man, there's nothing I can do about this game. Like, my team's feeding, they're losing the lanes. Like, I'm on like, some melee hard carry up against a really aggressive dual lane with lots of stuns, lots of harassment. I can't farm. My team's losing the lanes they should be winning. I'm absolutely screwed. I feel powerless to do anything about this game. I've had that feeling a lot. If you ever solo queue, you will have this feeling sooner or later. The thing is, you don't have to feel powerless. Now, I'm not promising you that good picking, good laning will always mean that you have a good game. But I am saying that a lot of these games where you feel powerless, if you have good lanes, if you make intelligent decisions with how you lane your heroes, the adjustments that you make to those lanes, you can turn games that would have been sort of those powerless downward slope, just descent into chaos and madness and, slitting your wrist kind of thing. You can turn those into successful games, or at least games where you feel like you have a modicum of control. And then in the games where you have strong lanes, which do happen occasionally for all of us, you never have to feel powerless. You just get to dictate the flow of the game, the tempo from the word go. So that's really why the laning stage is so important. I guess along with that, the first step to sort of being successful with laning, like, all right, I pick a lineup and I want to set my heroes up to be in good laning positions. Well, how do you know what the good lanes are for your team unless you can predict what your enemy is going to do with their lanes? That's really the first step to being successful with the laning stage. And so we're going to be talking a lot in this episode about how, sort of predicting how your opponents will lane, and then making adjustments to what your expectations are. Versus, and if if they do something different, maybe you make another adjustment. But the basic idea is you want to be able to predict their lanes. And finally, I will mention, and keep this in mind as we go through the episode, there's many different ways to be successful in the laning stage. It depends on your lineup, it depends on the team composition, it depends on the matchup. Whether it's getting early towers, free farm for your carry, kills, like these are sort of the traditional markers of success in the lane, but there's also some untraditional ones. For example, denying the enemy team gold or experience, like shutting down their hard carry. You don't necessarily see that reflect on the scoreboard as much, but it's still a way to measure success. And along with that, we talked last week, we saw the Outlaned bounty hunter, and I was talking a lot about this idea of not winning your lane, but minimizing the amount by which you lose that lane. And that is a form of success we'll see in many of these games. Minimizing your losses in a difficult or even unwinnable lane. So there's lots of different ways to be successful in the laning stage, and again, it's all very variable and it depends on a lot of factors. But just keep in mind some of these different ideas of success, and when we're going through these replays, try and sort of apply them and think about, is this lane achieving its goal? Is it being successful at what it's setting out to do? Is it achieving some form of success at all? Okay, with all that being said, we're going to dive into the first replay, and as I do so, I want to talk about what I would like you guys to do, what I'm going to be doing, and sort of just follow along with me here. Okay, so for each replay, we're going to do, well, first let me get the right replay up. Why is my copy paste not working? Sorry, guys. Alright, here we go. Fantastic, fabulous, wonderful. Here we go. Okay, so for each replay, I want you guys to do the following. I think it's 6 steps, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so, first I should say we're going to be looking at 3 replays total. We're going to be looking at one pro game where we're going to see some very successful lanes. And then we're going to look at 2 pub games where the lanes are very unsuccessful. For all the replays, I want you to do the following. We're going to predict the opponent's lanes. So for this replay, put yourself in the shoes of Darer. You are playing for... I believe it's for Darer. Why did it say they were on the Radiant? That was weird. Okay, either way. We're looking at Darer's perspective here. So we want to think about things from their point of view. So our first step here is to try and predict our opponent's lanes, and I just realized I don't have in-game sound. Let me fix that right now. Okay, so predict your opponent's lanes. Well, let's look at LGD's lineup. As far as who can handle that off lane, Tidehunter can solo that. We see that a lot in the American scene, but realistically, that's not normally how the Chinese like to do things. That's really something the teams like Complexity prefer. So probably I'm going to say Queen of Pain will solo top, Tinker's going to go mid, and then they're going to try lane the Naga. And part of this is just knowing the teams. Like LGD and a lot of these Chinese teams, they love to farm up their supports a lot. Tidehunter and Shadow Shaman are pretty level dependent as far as supports go. We want to get 6 on both of them as quickly as possible, and even more for Shadow Shaman. So I'm expecting a tri-lane with the Naga, a solo top Queen of Pain, and then a Tinker mid. If I'm Darer, that's what I expect, knowing LGD. Also, just looking at the hero picks, what's going to make sense for them. They could run an offensive tri-lane, but that's pretty risky. Okay, so that's our first step, is just sort of predict the lanes. Then the next thing I want us to do is talk about the goals of each lane for that team. So for Darer and... let me actually just... Is the volume good? I feel like my in-game's too loud. Can anyone tell me? Is the in-game volume good relative to my mic, or is one too loud? Come on, chat. Alright, well, I'm going to turn it down.
Pull roots and run.
You guys let me know if it's good. Too loud, yeah, I agree. I don't know why it's so loud. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I normally have it much quieter than that. It sounded like a shotgun. Okay, either way, in-game sound's not too important for this one. So, we predicted the lanes, right? Now we're going to look at Darer's lanes and talk about their goals for these lanes. So, what we're going to see is a Shadow Demon Kunkka mid. We've seen this dual lane before from Mousesports. We've seen it from a couple of teams. This is a very, very powerful dual lane, very good at getting kills. Now, you run this dual lane to get those kills. Disruption, into Soul Catcher, into Torrent, and followed up with a Tidebringer. You don't run this dual lane to farm. You don't run this dual lane to push or anything like that. It's just not good at those things. You run this dual lane to get kills. So our goal mid is dominate that mid lane, whether it's the Tinker, whether it's the Queen of Pain. Really, whatever hero is going mid, if it's a solo hero, they can easily get kills. So that's going to be the goal for Darer here. If we look towards the top lane, it's going to be Sandcade and Leshrac. Sandcade and Leshrac, I've talked about this in many of my casts, very level dependent, very farm dependent. So our goal there is just going to be to get levels and farm, and if that enemy solo overextends, that's where you can look to set up some kills. But for the most part, just get levels, pull the lane a lot, deny that solo as much farm as possible, and then finally our Prophet in the off lane. He's up against the tri-lane, so not dying, that's step number 1. Step number 2, pull the creep wave using your treants if you can. Or block the camp in this case. Nice job by him. Just jungle if necessary. Do whatever you can to defend the tower. Get what you can out of this lane. This is that minimize your losses kind of thing that I was talking about. He's not going to win the lane, but he can minimize his losses. And then the final thing I want us to look at for this game is just how likely are they able to achieve these goals. So actually middle lane, we're already seeing Showite's about to die, so let me just back up just a touch. But how likely are they to be able to achieve these goals? Well, mid lane, it's a Tinker solo against the Shadow Demon Kunkka. Pretty much a guaranteed kill if you hit the Disruption Torrent combination. Especially if you block him in with the Disruption Illusions, or if the Soul Catcher is there. Once you get some levels, this is a guaranteed kill. Even if it's Queen of Pain, we've seen in some pro games that she can die easily with this combo. So high chance of success here. High chance of success up here as well, because they can pull, they have great lockdown, which really negates Queen of Pain's blink. And then in the bottom lane, Prophet doesn't have a good time, but he has backup options. He can always go into the jungle. He can pull the creep wave, like we're probably going to see him do. But let's look at mid lane first. That's where the actual start. It's a Disruption, a Torrent to follow. And by the way, this is an absolutely sick block here. G did not even expect this to hit. You see he throws the Torrent really late. So really nice job coming out there by Darer. They're going to get a kill off the bat. That's your first blood. So goal number 1, crush the middle lane. They're already succeeding in this lane. We're going to see up top. Well, for the moment, Yao's trying to get what farm he can. He's trying to get what levels he can. But look at the ability for this lane to harass him. Very, very powerful at harassment. Leshrac coming in doing some auto attacks. He's going to take a little bit of damage to Shadow Strike. And early on, Queen of Pain will be okay, but once these heroes get level 2, 3, and even a little bit higher than that, Yao's really going to have a hard time. So both of these lanes, high chance of them being successful, and I'm actually going to throw it on directed and put it in 2x speed now, just so that we can catch all the kills and pretty much just sort of, you know, follow along with the flow of the game here. Again, Prophet's sort of that sacrifice hero. He's not really getting too much right now, but we'll see that he's able to stay alive and get some levels. He's level 2. He's going to keep on hanging on. So again, we're looking at these lanes. We're just trying to see, are they achieving their goals? They've gotten a kill mid. They haven't killed one top yet. But they're getting the pulls going. You can see Shrek, that brown dot on the screen, is doing the double pull right now. It's really denying a lot of experience to Queen of Pain, getting some good farm of his own. And here comes Yao, and he's probably, I believe he goes down here. He goes down relatively soon. And yeah, here we go. Burrow Strike, Split Earth, Edict. And then Artstyle does a great job of predicting where the blink will be. Chases him, kills him off. Top lane is achieving its goal. It's getting kills, and it's pulling, so it's shutting down the Queen of Pain in multiple ways. Mid lane's already done its job. It's gotten the kill. We're seeing a team that had a clear plan with their lanes here, that picked lanes with an understanding of how their opponents wanted to lane it. And then they're just, everything's going according to plan, basically. That's how I would characterize this game. And this, by the way, this was an epic game. This was LGD versus Dare, game number 2 from Beyond the Summits World Tour for the group stages. So if you haven't watched it, I don't want to spoil it, but it is a fantastic game. But as far as games go, this is about as great of a start as you can hope for. Your Prophet isn't dying. He's getting some levels, not a lot, but some. Both your dual lanes are dominated, so you're winning 2 lanes handily. The one that you're losing, it's only a solo hero there, so it's not a big loss. You can see Sand King Effect is the highest level here in the game, so we'll even fast forward a little more. Just waiting for the action to kick up. So you're going to see a couple more kills happen. Now, I just sort of want to give you guys a sense of, you know, this is a perfect game, right? I mean, we look at this game like, what is going wrong for Dare right now? I guess they're giving up a lot of farm on the bottom lane. But considering what they're getting in return, and the heroes that they're shutting down, Queen of Pain and Tinker, really important heroes to have levels and farm on. And you can see Queen of Pain just not having a good time at all, being ushered off the lane repeatedly. G controlling the runes as well. That's another thing that they're doing with this dual lane, which I didn't mention. But whenever you run a dual lane versus solo, very easy to control the runes because you have 2 heroes. One can check the runes. Well, here we go mid. They're going to roam in, look to set up a kill. I believe Enlight does go down here, but 2 heroes rotating in. LGD trying to make an adjustment. Or will they? No, DDC is going to get caught out. He will take a fall. And Enlight, even though he's going to die, is wasting a lot of time. Queen of Pain was forced back to base, by the way, so even though they didn't kill her again, she's being forced to run all the way to base, so they're really winning that lane hard. The rotation in mid doesn't even pan off. You guys get the idea. I don't want to beat this one over your head too much. Dare, everything is going perfectly for them in this game. I think that's fair to say. So this is an example of having good lanes and having a plan and predicting what your opponents are going to do, and then everything just goes right. But this is an ideal world. This is I don't want to call it fantasy land, but even for the pros, things rarely go this well. And it gets even better for Dare, and eventually LGD starts to make a comeback. There's a big epic team fight, but it turns out to be a fantastic game in the end. But this is the kind of start you hope for. These are the kind, when you pick lanes to do a certain thing, and every lane is achieving its objective, it's about all you can hope for. But we're going to look at some games now. These are actually going to be pub games that I've played, where things go a little bit not according to expectation, I think is the way to put it. Or maybe according to expectation, but not according to our hopes and dreams, I should say. So again, what I want you guys to look at, first we're going to try and predict the lanes, and I'm going to skip ahead to 248, we're going to pause real quick. Actually, we'll pause here. This is a good time to pause. Okay, so step 1, and I'm going to open this up to the chat, although I'm going to keep on going. Let me hop into the game. Okay. First thing I would like you guys to do, just based on the hero picks, try and predict the lanes. Now again, there's an element of randomness to this. Your opponents might not know how to lane things properly. They might just choose to do something wacky. You can't account for all of these random factors, but what is the most likely way for them to lane it? Well, one of the first things I look for is how many melee heroes do they have. In this case, they have 3. They have a Tiny, an Earthshaker, and a Kunkka. So that means if they run anything except for a melee mid, that means they're going to have a double melee lane, either bottom or top, and generally people like to avoid that. Tiny is also their most powerful ganker, and a hero that doesn't really do well in any sort of dual lane situation. We'll see sometimes Complexity likes to get him farm, but it's not really that common. So probably, I'm going to guess, my guess is, Tiny's going to go mid, and then we're going to see 2 dual lanes. I don't know which way they'll go, but most likely I'd expect to see the Viper Earthshaker lane together, and then the Kunkka Shadow Demon. We saw last game, the Kunkka Shadow Demon combination is very, very powerful. So that's what I personally would expect to see. You guys may expect to see something different. But the goal here, the exercise that you should be going through is just trying to figure out, think about their lanes, think about what makes sense for them. Put yourself in their shoes. And then the next step is to try and make lanes that make sense. Now, you're going to see, we don't really choose the best lanes. And we're going to see it actually turns out to be a rather disastrous start to the game. So I'm going mid as Sand King. I like to go solo mid as him. I expected Tiny to be mid. This is a lane I expect to dominate. It's a 1v1 melee matchup. Tiny has good base damage, but I random, so I have a Quelling Blade, I have a lot of plus stats, and most importantly, once I hit level 2, I'm going to have Caustic Finale to work with, which means I can easily out-harass the Tiny, push the lane to get the runes, and then get my bottle and just generally control the lane a bit better. So he gets a haste, he's going to harass Wine's Big a little bit here, but Wine's Big should be okay. So I expect to win my lane, right, mid. I think that's a fair assessment that I should be able to win that lane, 1v1. As we look towards the Nerubian Assassin and the CM in the top lane, well, it's not really the strongest dual lane. Oftentimes, or Nerubian, I should say Nyx. Is it Nyx or Nyx? Whatever it is. Nyx Assassin up top with CM. Probably not going to be Viper ES. They have that great Fissure AoE stun, really reliable, strong defensively. And Viper just going to be a little bit tankier and better at harassing. Now, it's possible for this dual lane to win, but mostly what they should be going for, their goal, if you will, is to just try and pull the lane, get some farm up, and get the Nerubian Assassin level 6 as quickly as possible. That's the goal of him for that lane. Wayne's Big, he's this low druid, he's off in the jungle. He's playing essentially a farming role here. He's not contributing to the team really at all except by farming. So he's trying to get items up. That's his goal, is just to farm. And then finally we have the bottom lane, which is pretty much a disaster in the making. This is a lane that should never have happened. It's a lane that we didn't expect to happen because Falafel Waffle said he was going to pick Windrunner, and then he picked TA. But we didn't make an adjustment, so you can fault us as well for not doing so. He goes bottom. This dual lane we saw can crush so many different heroes. Now TA may be able to live for a little while until they get Sentry Wards up, but she's not going to farm. She's not really going to be able to stay in experience range for too long. We're going to see as the levels increase, it's just going to get harder for her to accomplish anything. She's actually going to end up basically feeding her pants off in this bottom lane. But it really shouldn't be a surprise, because this dual lane, Kunkka is Shadow Demon, TA can't really handle this. She's very strong 1v1. She's not good against these dual lanes. So in terms of our sort of power assessments, we expect SK to dominate this middle lane and gank aggressively. NA and CM shouldn't feed, but they're probably not going to dominate top. And, well, here's the X factor. Wayne's Big off the bat, comes out of the jungle, sets up a gank with that lone druid. So a lane that maybe wouldn't be the easiest to win. This is the beauty of having that jungler. And this is something I wanted to talk about, but unfortunately kind of stole my thunder by killing so quickly there, is that you have your lanes, right? And if everything's going swimmingly, everything's going smoothly, which, by the way, it's not here. These two almost died, even in a 3v2. That's not a good sign for the lane, is what I would want to say about it. But you have these lanes where you expect things to go a certain way, you have certain goals in mind. If they don't work out, well, what can you do? There's two main things that you can look back on the game and say. One of them is you could have laned it differently. So you could have, from the word go, you could have put heroes into different positions. Now, this top lane is working out okay. I would fault the Radiant for not having any wards, so they don't have any vision over here of that lone druid rotating in. Normally in higher level play, you would see some sort of vision for that suicide lane, but in spite of the fact they don't have vision, we make a good play there. But we still, really, this lane, you don't expect it to do well. So what would other lane options be? Well, one of those options would be to run a tri-lane with the SK, the Nyx Assassin, and the CM. It sounds a little funky, but especially on the dire side, you can pull here, you can pull here, you can pull pretty much everywhere. CM can support whoever's farming the lane, whether that's the Nyx or the SK. Either way, maximize your levels and farm in that lane, and just gives you so much killing potential with those three heroes. Multiple stuns, multiple disables, and lots of nukes. And still get some decent farm. Then you get to put TA mid up against Tiny. In Dota 2, this is a pretty decent matchup. Avalanche will hit 4 times. It has 4 damage instances, so it'll chew through a fraction. But TA should be okay in this matchup, and do a lot better than the bottom lane. And then in the bottom lane, well, we have one of the best in the business to handle it. That's Lone Druid, so we could have thrown him down there. And this pause is actually quite long, so we're going to skip ahead. And we're actually going to speed things up. So that's one of the, to me, that's the big alternative for the lane options here. The other thing that we saw, which I wanted to talk about, is Lone Druid coming out of the jungle, setting up a gank top. And that's one of the that's the other aspect of thinking about the laning stage is, first of all, you can try and set up the right lanes. That's your lane options. The other thing you can try and do is make adjustments if the lanes aren't working. And so one adjustment we could have made, I was actually going to say Lone Druid comes out of the jungle and pushes, but even setting up kills can work quite well too. You're going to see I drop below mid, but I don't end up dying. So adjustments is the other big thing to keep in mind when you're trying to evaluate, are your lanes working? Are they going to be successful? And in this particular game, we don't really make any adjustments for the TA. She's actually doing surprisingly well bottom so far, but at some point she just starts feeding here. This might be that moment. The dust comes out. She's not going to die, but look at her farm right now. She's got a bottle, 3.5 minutes in. This is really better than she should be doing. They're not playing the matchup that well. But things get very hairy for her. She's going to start feeding quite a bit as the game progresses. And all game, she's going to be a non-factor. So what we could have done instead for our lane options, we had some options to lane it differently, running the tri-lane up top, Lone Druid bottom, and TA mid. We also could have made adjustments like Lone Druid coming out of the jungle and ganking, which he did. That's great. That helps the top lane. That wasn't overly successful. The other thing we could have done is Lone Druid come out of the jungle and just push. And that would be even more effective in my book. Let him get level 3 or 5, and then come out of the jungle, start pushing that lane. Earthshaker's good at anti-push, he's good at slowing things down, but with the Ring of Basilius, maybe with some other regen items, or an urn, or even just some regen for the heroes, you could definitely push that lane down quickly. Arcane Boots as well, maybe on the Nerubian Assassin. So those adjustments, that's the other thing we want to keep in mind on. And I guess the last big adjustment that I can think of offhand that we could have made, and you guys may have other ideas in the chat, so feel free to throw them out. But the other big idea that I'm thinking about is, well, CM and Nerubian Assassin could always go smoke gank mid, set up kills elsewhere, and then Lone Druid could just hold that top lane. Realistically, Viper and Earthshaker should not be able to kill Lone Druid as long as his positioning is good. And I'm just kind of toying with Earthshaker mid. So that's the other adjustment that I had in mind with the lanes that were given. So again, the two big ideas are, either, think about how you could have laid it differently, or what could you have done with the lanes you had to make things better? Could you have changed those lanes? Could you have made some adjustments? We're getting kills up top. Viper's being shut down, but our TA is feeding, really having a tough time. Our Lone Druid's farming okay, but not exceptionally well. Jungle Lone Druid is pretty slow at farming compared to other heroes like Lycan or Enigma. So are we really getting the best bang for our buck out of our lanes? Are we accomplishing our goals? I would say no. The two big issues are, one, Kunkka, that bottom lane is just getting crushed. And TA is not really a comeback kind of hero. She's a hero that needs a good start. The other big issue for me is that Lone Druid is not farming quickly enough. So because these are our two most important damage dealers in the mid to late game. So without them having a good start, we're going to see they continue to feed, they continue to struggle. I dive mid, I get a kill. Things look okay for now, but let me just tell you guys, this game gets real ugly in a hurry. We're actually going to fast forward quite a bit until there's some action. I come bottom, I try to set up a gank, I'm going to run away. TA just not really able to do anything because, again, no boots on her, no items. Can't really tower dive, even though I have a haste rune. Not the best coordination, they spotted out. Good disruption, but nonetheless, the lack of items on this TA really limiting her ability to have an impact. And we see TA dies again. That's something you'll see a lot more of this game. It also goes back to us not really having the best vision for her, not having any support in the lane as well. It's just not a good lane for TA, and it's something where we should have really made an adjustment. And if this is another hero, if this is a Windrunner, if this is a Prophet, if this is someone who doesn't need as many items or who is better equipped to come back from a bad start, no big deal. No big deal at all. But because this is a hero that just cannot deal with this kind of a bad start, it ultimately ends up crippling our team. And there's actually a long period of back and forth here. Everything looks good right now. We're 6-3. But again, Kunkka is free farming. I talked about one of the goals for me mid as the Sankey was just to completely shut down Tiny. And unfortunately, I haven't really done that. He's got 3 creeps per minute. He's got his basic items up. You can't completely shut someone down if you're not in the lane to do it. And although I'm being very effective ganking top overall, I would say, and putting some pressure on bottom, it's freeing up a lot of space for these other heroes to farm. The Kunkka, the Tiny, again, not great farm, but getting decent farm. And because I'm so active around the map, going for kills everywhere, it just ends up, and I feed top, no big deal there. You guys didn't see that one. But you can see just nobody wants to lane bottom. This is a lane where nobody wants to be anymore, and it's because they got fed early. They have the levels. The combo is not that scary at level 1 or 2, but once you get to level 5, 6, 7, that's where things get just devastating. And again, look at this TA. Level 7, but only boots in a bottle. Really, what is she going to do at this point? I can tell you, not a whole lot.
Radiant's bottom tower is under
By the time this game is about 40 minutes in, she's going to have a BKB and boot. So we make some blunders in our decision-making, our positioning here. We go for fights we shouldn't. You could definitely make a case that our play is not perfect and that the lanes aren't the only issues. But with better lanes, there's more margin to make these kinds of errors. And also, things that might just be blunders in another scenario end up working out okay. Because you have the items, you have the levels to be able to survive and turn things around. So I just want everyone to sort of take stock of the game right now. Let's just pause and look at TA. This is, again, our most important high-impact hero. What does she have right now? Boots, gloves of haste, and a bottle. Absolutely nothing. Cannot contribute at all. What does a lone druid have? A Midas at 13 minutes in and 2 pairs of boots. It's not bad farm, actually, and the lone druid got a first blood. He's farming reasonably well, but this is not going to be that 15-minute Radiance, 16-minute Radiance, dominant, carry performance where he can really throw the team on his shoulders and take the team, knock down early towers, put a lot of pressure on the map. This lone druid still has about 5-10 minutes before he can really impact the game, whereas for the Radiance squad, they already have everything they need. Tiny, yeah, he's dying, but boots, a bottle, as well as face boots, that's really all you need. Shadow Demon's got his disruption up, he's got level 7, so he's basically got all of his core levels and items there, and the boots, of course. Earthshaker 7 as well. Kunkka is getting very fat. Perseverance, phase boots, looks to be going for the Battlefield. And then Viper. Not really big, flashy items, but very, very tanky already with Power Treads and Double Wraithband, and getting close to Vitality Booster. I think he actually goes for Mechanism this game, but their heroes don't need as many items to be effective, and they also got a lot of farm early on. Whereas for us, our heroes that need a lot of items to be effective are being shut down. So it really goes back to the laning stage and goes back to the lack of adjustments we made. Again, there are things we could have done differently this game. Unfortunately, because time is short, I don't have time to show you guys the whole game. But suffice it to say that we end up just basically getting stomped in this game. And it's largely because I didn't have enough of an impact. There was too much pressure on me as the Sand King to make things happen. The Nyx Assassin as well, who I didn't look at. Arcane Boots, and a Null Talisman. But is really just not able to have an impact this game because it's not just about the levels and the items that this hero has, it's also about what do they have. And all their supports, all their heroes have pretty decent items and levels. So there's not too many easy kills on the map for this hero either. And again, that goes back to the laning stage where, although we got some things going our way, mid lane was won by us. Top lane we did reasonably well. We had a jungler farming. Normally you'd think you're coming out ahead, but that's not always the case. So we'll skip ahead just a little bit. And let me see, I think there's one more fight that I want to show you guys. Well, we're still finding the kills here and there. Yep, okay, here we go. So we're probably going to set up a couple kills bottom. Things are looking good, we get that kill. There's like one big fight where we just sort of throw everything apart, and I think I forgot to write the time down. Where is it? Aha. Alright, this is the fight where we basically throw the game. So for anyone who's wondering how to throw, this is how you do it. So 2 heroes get caught out to start, and then one by one we trickle in to try and help. I Burrow Strike, I Epicenter, I immediately cancel my Epicenter, which would have wiped their team, because I'm an absolute clown and a fool. Shame on me for doing so. But, so the fight not going away, and then Tiny comes in, just insta-gives the Nerubian Assassin. Again, these are just heroes that don't need a lot of items to make a big impact. In comes Viper with the mech, and we're just going to get kited. Their lockdown is too strong on their team. Our Lone Druid doesn't have that big damage item to be able to shut these heroes down, prevent them from chasing. And the route is on. So bad positioning, bad decision-making here, but also just the fact they have those levels and items, and we didn't really maximize our advantage in the laning stage. Coming back to bite us in the ass, and from this fight forward, it's pretty much just the only two heroes that live are the CM and the TA who's really not doing anything. It's just a downward slope towards destruction the rest of the way. We're actually winning in terms of gold experience, but not nearly as much as we should be for our lineup. Okay, so that's going to do it for this replay. We're now going to jump into our final replay of the day, another pub game that I played. And this one, well, this one's pretty easy to talk about for those of you who are trying to figure out what's wrong with the lanes. I'm not gonna lie, I should have got the Midas. That might have made a difference, but we still could have laid that game a lot better. Again, I'm not saying this is the only reason we lost the game. There are always more factors, but the point here is to focus on the one thing that we're interested in today, which is the laning phase. Okay, so we're going to skip ahead to 2:40 8. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so let's look at the lineups right now. For the rated, or for the Dire Squad, these are our heroes. We're going to look at things from their perspective. Oh, let's jump in the game. Okay, so we have Tidehunter and Anti-Mage are going to dual lane top. We're going to see Rupik goes mid, and then I believe Windrunner solos bottom, and once again we see that jungle Lone Druid. That's how we're going to choose to lane things. Now, should we have chosen to lane things that way? Well, let's look at our heroes. In terms of predicting their lanes, this is pretty tough to predict. Most likely we're going to see Puck mid, and then dual lanes with the Alchemist and the AA because they have that Chain Stone potential with Cold Feet, as well as Unstable Concoction. It's not really good Chain Stone potential, but it's something. It's better than nothing. They could throw the Shadow Demon in with him, but Riki and AA don't really have much synergy together. And probably we'll see Riki and Shadow Demon lane together, just because Shadow Demon is the stronger babysitter. And Riki is just very, very weak in lane. Although, to be honest, Alchemist is pretty poor in lanes as well. So, either way, expect to see a solo mid Puck and then 2 dual lanes. And that is how they're going to choose to lane it. For our team, expecting those lanes, I'm going mid as Rubik. I should be able to dominate this lane. Puck is not a very strong solo hero. Rubik is a very strong solo hero, especially mid. I have a better pushing ability. I can easily outlast hit him, thanks to having that Fade Bolt, which reduces his damage. Is very spammable. I also have a higher intelligence pool to work with. Pretty much there's no way I should lose this lane. I should dominate mid. I should get 6 quickly, and then once I have 6, I can really push the lane hard, stealing his orb and then spamming it, along with the Fade Bolt, and also pressuring Genki other lanes. So I should dominate that mid lane. For top lane, if we're going to run the AM and Tide together, whatever this Radiant team chooses to do, it's almost certain they're going to have at least 1 ranged hero top, just because it would be very silly not to do so. And they have 3 ranged heroes to work with. Which means it's a Tidehunter AM. They really can't do much against this, even a single ranged hero, let alone a dual lane. Just such a weak combination, unless your opponents overextend or make a mistake. So their goal there is to pull a lot. Anti-Mage gets some farm under the tower, and we can unpause now. And then basically just try and hang on, get what you can, and don't give up too much. It's one of these situations where even though you're in the safe lane, you definitely will have the disadvantage in the lane. Unless the Lone Druid comes out and sets up a kill early on. For a Lone Druid, if he's going to sit in the jungle, well, then that's his goal, is just to get farm. And then Windrunner bottom lane. Even though it's a Windrunner who's pretty strong, she might even be able to win bottom. It's going to be an AA Alchemist, but she's got to be careful about the chain stun. So, as usual, the main thing is not dying here, but yeah, you can shut down Alchemist pretty well. Windrunner is great attack animation, great base damage. So this is an off lane where Windrunner should be able to win it. But the big weak point in this lineup, and we're going to see it becomes a major issue for the team, is this Tidehunter Anti-Mage dual lane. Just no ability for Tidehunter to support Anti-Mage or really provide any form of harassment or lane control. And ultimately that just comes back to ruin us. Now the other thing here that I want to talk about is the big matchup consideration that we did not address is Shadow Demon laning against Anti-Mage. The reason for this is once Anti-Mage gets Mana Burn, Shadow Demon will have Disruption, and every time he disrupts Anti-Mage, 2 illusions of him will be created doing the full Mana Burn damage. So, there are a couple ways to try and deal with this. The first one would be just not to level up Mana Burn. It's what we see Bernie do a lot of the time if he's up against the Shadow Demon. So even see him go solo mid and do that. The other option is not to lane your Anti-Mage verse that Shadow Demon. So we'll watch the game for a little bit. We'll see how things progress. But again, just keep in mind what we could have done differently as far as selecting our lanes, and then as far as making adjustments to those lanes. So we're going to just follow directed cam here for a little bit. And I really want you to focus on this Anti-Mage, who's farming okay now, but we're going to see once he starts to level up, once we get about 3 or 4 minutes in, he really struggles in this lane. Forced to blink away. There's your disruption. And already, look what's happened to him. He's taken 1 point in mana break. He's lost nearly all of his mana. He doesn't even have enough for another blink. And he's chewing through his regen. I don't really like the Quelling Blade pickup here, but that's another story for another day. This is just not a good lane for Anti-Mage. We're going to see as the game progresses that he just doesn't farm at all. So really keep your eyes on that farm number for the Anti-Mage. Lone Druid's farming well. I'm farming well. Alchemist getting absolute free farm. Is it worth giving up free farm to Alchemist in exchange for a Rubik and a Lone Druid in the jungle? Maybe. Maybe. But really the Anti-Mage is going to be the problem, because this is not a Lone Druid who at least can push towers a little bit with the bear. If Anti-Mage doesn't get farmed, he is not a useful hero. That's got to be priority number 1 whenever you pick an Anti-Mage, is to get him some farm or get something amazing in return. Just keep an eye on that creep score. 7 creeps 3 minutes in, and it just gets worse. And in fact, maybe we can even put on player perspective here. And we have a bit of a pause. We'll skip through that. Oh, no, I went too far. Oh, okay, he already came down here. So I actually want to point out, Anti-Mage just decides to rotate bottom because he's so miserable top that he just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And you're going to see the Radiant make a great adjustment. They said the Shadow Demon bottom as well. But this is us trying to make an adjustment. So that's one thing I talked about that we could do. We're trying to do it here, so give us credit for that. Windrunner now going to fall into more of a babysitter role. And in this lane situation, Anti-Mage is perfectly fine. But you're going to see Ancient Apparition Journeys mid, and Shadow Demon already pick up his TP. Really great play by him this game, by the way. Have to give him a lot of props for that. Just following Anti-Mage around, being a complete nuisance. Again, there are some things Anti-Mage could have done differently, but it goes back to our initial lane setup. And why am I going even slower? Okay, there we go. We chose the lane Anti-Mage top, we chose to get a point Mono Burn on him, and now we're reaping the whirlwind, if you will. We're farming pretty well, not amazingly. Riki's getting a lot of farm up top. And what do you know? Shadow Demon shows up bottom. Anti-Mage being driven out of lane. Still doesn't have his Ring of Health 4 minutes in. And remember, he was farming in the safe lane. This is not acceptable farm for a safe lane. Anti-Mage. Top lane, Tidehunter, only level 3. Lone Druid, only level 3. At 4 minutes in, a Lone Druid will normally be 5 or higher if he's soloing a lane. Which we could have done things a lot differently with the lanes here. He could be having that bear with Entangle up, at which point, guess what? Riki can't really approach the creep wave. Neither can Ancient Apparition, because if they do, that Entangle is going to ruin them. Instead, watch what happens, stop. We see a lot of damage going out onto the Lone Druid here, and onto the Tidehunter. Only a level 4 Riki, but he's already bullying a lane that really should be bullying him. And they're going to start to turn things around. But again, if he's 5, he's probably going to get a kill here, especially if he ever gets an Entangle. So, we can see their top lane's not having a great time. Ancient Apparition may actually take a fall. Bit of a feed here from the Tidehunter. In fact, a huge feed from the Tidehunter. And that's the first blood going their way. And then Riki decides to feed a kill back the other way. Again, not the highest skill plays at all time. But I guess the big takeaway here is this. It's this Anti-Mage on the bottom lane. Still 10 creeps. I looked at him a minute and a half ago, he had 10. We're looking at him now, a minute and a half later. He still has 10. Windrunner's running for life. Everybody's pretty much in shambles. Riki is now running rampant through the jungle, killing off the Lone Druid. This is a hero that should have been shut down completely in the offlane. Riki is very weak in that position, but our lane there was weak as well. So he ends up getting 6 quickly, and now he's going to snowball. 2-1 already, level 6. Let's see, his net worth, highest in the game, is an offlane Riki with decent but not exceptional farm. This just shouldn't happen. So now I think it's a good time to talk about what could we have done differently this game. Well, as far as laning options, something unconventional we could have done is set Anti-Mage mid to lane against Puck. He actually would handle Puck very well 1v1. Can actually dominate Puck 1v1 because he's got so much higher base damage, a much better attack animation, and with Stout Shield, Puck's auto attacks really don't do anything. So 1v1 Anti-Mage can win that. If Shadow Demon comes mid, then at the very least you have the high ground to work with. You're never going to be far away from your tower, and you'll get more levels. So sending Anti-Mage mid and then running a dual lane with the Windrunner tied bottom, very strong defensive lane, and then the Rubik pulling for Lone Druid up top. That would have been another laning option, and I think a much more effective one. And also a little bit tricky, and that's something I haven't really mentioned, but if you can ever do lanes that throw your opponents off or that they won't expect, I mean, I'm talking about trying to predict your opponent's lanes. If you can be unpredictable, that's really going to make your lanes that much stronger. So if two sets of lanes are equally good, but one of them is less predictable, go with the less predictable combo. And Riki's just going to keep on getting kills, and this game is pretty much... It's very early, it's not over, but it's looking very, very bad because we have a Lone Druid who's still not 6. We have a Tide who's nowhere near Ravage. We have an Anti-Mage not farming. Windrunner has her boots and an old Talisman, but no big farm up on her, no big items. Alchemist as well, already has a Midas. About as bad as the lanes could start. So I talked about some laning options. Another option would be to send Lone Druid bottom, Windrunner top to support Anti-Mage. Now the big advantage there would be you get Windrunner up top, instead of having a Tidehunter who can't do anything. Windrunner, very good lane controller, great support here if you need to harass. Those auto attacks could be very effective to shut down the Riki, as well as the Shadow Demon. And then we could have Tidehunter roaming and pulling over here, or maybe even rotating towards mid to try and set up some kills. And then we could have Lone Druid in the offlane, like I mentioned. So that was one other option. Finally, something we see a lot from Complexity. Throw Tidehunter in the offlane. Windrunner could support AM, like I mentioned before. Lone Druid could stay in the jungle like you've run it, and then still have Rubik mid. So a lot of different options here for us. I think really all of them would have been better than these lanes we chose. Now, again, it wouldn't have been nearly as bad if Anti-Mage didn't take Mana Burn. Also wouldn't have been as bad if Shadow Demon didn't go top, but this is one of those situations where we did have power over this game, and I was playing with the Anti-Mage, we were on TeamSpeak, and let me just say, he was complaining constantly, he said he couldn't do anything, and truthfully, yeah, he couldn't do anything once he had taken Mana Burn, once he was in that lane, but we could have done something before it got to that point, as a group. And that's really the take-home here, is you're not powerless. You might become powerless if you make the wrong decisions, but initially, you are not powerless, guys. You have the option, not only with the hero picks, but even after the hero picks, to choose those right lanes. And that's pretty much, I mean, this is really all I want to show from this game, because that's the main takeaway here. It's just the lanes don't work out at first, and there's a failure to make adjustments, and the adjustments we make aren't good enough. There's a failure to make the correct lane selections in the beginning. That's the big broad strokes, the big takeaway that I want you guys to have for today. So, with all that being said, I'm sure there are a lot of questions, or whether it's about these games or just laning in general. I'm going to open up the floor now for anybody who has them to talk about. So, any questions about what we've talked about today with the lanes, with the I mean, particularly with the lanes, whether it's just adjustments that players made or failed to make, or whether it's the laning options that we had in the first place. Cruxus87, great question, asks, LD, often I see horrible lanes on my team, and I say they should be changed, but they don't listen. What can we do then? There's only so much you can do. If your team just refuses to listen, I would say try to be nice and gentle about it. Say how, instead of, AM, don't go top, you idiot, there's going to be a Shadow Demon there. Maybe something like, AM, I think you'll have a better type mid, why don't you go there? So, first of all, your tone can help your team to be more receptive, but realistically, sometimes people just don't want to listen. They might not speak your language, whatever the case may be. They're not going to listen to you. Well, to some degree, it's out of your control. But what you can try to do is just maximize your impact. So, let's say, for example, you're in a lane that just isn't working. Like, I guess the most common example would be if you're dual laning in the off lane, right? And it's like this is probably the worst situation you see in a lot of pubs, is two melee heroes just having a horrible time in the off lane. Like, even worse, two carries in the offlane, like a Riki and an Anti-Mage, up against, I don't know, Leshrac Sand King. Just a useless double melee hard carry lane. They can't do anything. The best thing you can do in a situation like that is do your part. So in that case, your part is leaving that lane and go farm somewhere else. Sure, you might be the better one to solo that lane if you're, say, the Anti-Mage instead of the Riki. It might be better for your partner in crime to be the one who makes the adjustment, but if he's not going to, and you can make an adjustment that will help the lane, do what you can. Iron Mass 75 asks, how do you solve a dual melee lane that comes up against a dual ranged? For the most part, you just try and avoid those lanes. The big thing is not to take too much harassment early on. Like, for example, I've actually seen dual melee lanes be very effective in certain situations. A great example would be, say, Juggernaut and Earthshaker or Sand King. If you ever get a good Fissure Block or a Burrow Strike to start, they can get a kill, but the big issue is going to be, if they're already low HP when they try to initiate, they're going to die. So you want to really be careful about how you last hit. Don't stand next to the creep wave. Only approach it at the last second to try and get those last hits. If you have a good defensive hero out of those two melee heroes like Earthshaker, keep him positioned far back. If you're in the safe lane, try and pull to keep the creeps near your tower to limit the harassment. Get smart items as well. Get things like Stout Shield, get some regen. Don't buy boots right away or anything aggressive. Quelling Blade would probably be a bad choice in that case, since all you want to do is survive and level up. The other thing you can do, again, is you don't have to stay in that lane. You always remember that sometimes it might be better for you to roam, go set up ganks on other lanes. So let's say you're a Sven or an Earthshaker or anyone with a stun or a slow. You can go try and kill another lane. You might not be able, your ally who stays in that lane might get nothing accomplished. They might not farm at all, but if you get first blood mid, that's a better trade-off than neither of you farming, neither of you doing anything in that dual lane. Shikaro asks, is jungling the best way to make the best of poor picks and lanes? No, it's definitely not always the best thing to do. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's great, but I think in a lot of lower level games, junglers don't really know how to play the position properly. You'll see them just farm and they won't come out of the jungle to push, they won't come out of the jungle to gank. You'll also see players they can't handle the solo lane where they're 1v2, which is usually what happens unless the enemy has the jungle. So I would say be wary of jungling if you're lower level. If you're going to jungle and you're the jungler, make sure you have an impact on the game beyond just farming. Even if you're here like Lycan or Ursa and you're jungling, you can go get Roshan. There's always something you can do to help the team besides just sitting in the jungle farming away. If you're not the jungler, you got to pick heroes that are strong and know how to play them properly. A lot of that comes with experience. So I would say sometimes jungling can be very helpful. Let's say you have a hero that won't be that effective if he's dual laning, but he's great if he gets a solo, like Tidehunter bottom, for example. Let's say we had Tidehunter Anti-Mage bottom in this game that I just showed you. That's going to be useless, but if Tide goes bottom by himself, he'll probably hit 6 a lot quicker, especially in a pub game. They're not always going to keep the lane pulled back. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to push it occasionally. You'll get some levels. If you get that quick 6, that's going to help your team a lot more than if Anti-Mage is there leeching experience and neither of you is getting anything out of it. So, in that case, having a jungler, or even just having a hero go and do a lot of pulling would be helpful. The Sneep asks, when is running a tri-lane a good decision? I guess two main situations. If you have a lot of level dependent support, so you can do a lot of pulling. So especially if you're on the dire side, you can do so many pulls and really maximize your experience, your gold, and get them. I can take my headphones off. Yay! I can hear myself again. But yeah, you can maximize your gold and your experience that way. Do a lot of pulling, especially if you have a strong kind of solo farming carry like a Morphling or a Mirana who doesn't need too much help. That's a good time to run a tri-lane. Of course, if you can get kills, like if you have a very powerful offensive tri-lane, multiple stuns, a Visage, multiple slows, a Venomancer, things like that, then running a tri-lane can be great. I would say do it because it's fun and it's good to get the experience with it. But tri-lanes are a very tricky business, and if they don't work out, you normally are shooting your team in the foot for the entire game. Baller778 says, what if they lane 2 carries on the lane and they don't want to move? Again, just try to have the biggest impact possible. So, let's say you're a solo mid Night Stalker or something and you have an Anti-Mage and a Riki both farming that lane together. Don't try and help them right away. Get your levels, get your core items up, but when you're in a position to help, then go. So let's say you had 7, carry a TP scroll. If the enemy is diving that lane, TP in, turn things around, set up some kills. Even if they die, at least you bail that lane out a little bit. So to some degree, again, it's out of your control, but just focus on controlling the things that you can. I think that's going to do it for the questions. I've seen a lot of mentioning that I'm Rubik because I bob my head up and down. But I think that's pretty much going to cover it for today, guys. So thank you for the great questions. I hope it was all very informative. We'll actually take one more. Gruffy Hawk asks, how do you impact the game as a support? Well, I will say as far as lanes go, there's a couple of things you want to do. Either harassing the opponents, so zoning the enemy heroes out of that lane to help your carry farm. Going for kills if you have a strong kill lane, like let's say you're a Sand King and a Leshrac and you're playing a support Leshrac. Setting up kills, harassment, pulling as well to just get some farm, and more importantly, avoid stealing farmer experience from the carry or the farmer in that lane. The other thing you want to try and do is spread your success to other lanes. So if you're doing really well in your lane and your carry's fine to go, especially if it's a strong solo laner who doesn't really need your help, spread that success to other lanes, buy a smoke, go set up a gank somewhere else, and get some kills mid, and just generally share the wealth. So that's just a couple of things you can do as far as the laning stage goes as a support to try and make an impact and compensate for any allies who aren't being too effective. Okay, that's going to do it, guys. Thank you all for the great questions today. That's going to do it for episode number 32. Wow. And for anyone who's wondering, tomorrow we'll be learning with Lumi on his channel, twitch.tv/luminousinverse. He doesn't know the topic yet, but he'll figure it out. Also, if you want to watch Beyond the Summons World Tour for the semifinals, EG versus CLG, followed by the grand finals, the winner of that playing off against IG, that's going to kick off at 9 EST tomorrow. That's, what is that? 15 CST? Yeah, 15 CST, then the grand finals at 18 CST. So I hope to see all you guys there for the grand finals, as well as the semifinals, and that's going to do it for today's episode. So thank